We haven't mentioned deficit as much as debt before, but right now, what is it? $1.4 trillion for 2009 is the deficit. It was something like 700 billion last year. That is, it's going up. And it's now costing every man, woman, and child in the United States almost $5,000 a year to pay for the deficit, just for that alone. So the young people, the young generations are caught now in this buying the debt and deficit.
Well, if we had somebody in the White House, we do have a man who's supposed to be a constitutional scholar and a teacher. But if the Constitution were followed and he turned the wars over to the Congress and said, either declare war or get the heck out, okay? Which is the logical thing for him to do. And if he looked at the Constitution and said, you know, we're not supposed to have a standing army in times of peace, so close those 750 military bases and let's have us a good National Guard here at home. Walk softly and carry a big stick. We'd save a whole lot of money.
Well, I think that's, you're wise to say that. What we're going to see, though, most likely is something a bit different. I'm afraid that we're going to be a much more poor nation because of our unwise decisions. We're going to enter a time where we're not going to have the type of wealth that we used to remember here in the United States because we squandered it. And our military is overstretched. My father is retired National Guard, and he went to Iraq. And I've heard stories about what military servicemen have had to endure over there. And I've also had to see now his deployment ended just a year ago, and their regiment, he's retired now, but their division is actually being sent back to Iraq, being sent back. After only one year after a deployment. That's how overextended our military is now because of the wars in Iraq. And we just can't maintain this anymore. We can't maintain this kind of economy. Right. We can't maintain this kind of military superiority. It's coming to an end.
Just think
it's coming to an end.
Of the low moral plane we've taken in using depleted uranium and other things that kill.
Cluster bombs.
Cluster bombs and things that kill children and innocent civilians over there. And our soldiers are breathing this stuff, and they'll come back with
Gulf War syndrome.
Well,
some people think
it'll
is related.
actually be worse because the depleted uranium, I'm not sure exactly what the half-life is, but it'll take it like 50,000 years to decay by half. So I doubt that any soldier's going to live 50,000 years, so it'll be high intensity his entire life.
We saw it in Iraq, too, after we dropped millions of pounds of depleted uranium, both in the first Gulf War and this war. We've dropped way more depleted uranium. They're radioactive weapons that we're using. Some people argue they're WMD. And these weapons, when they explode, they vaporize, and they get into people's lungs and the water and the food systems. And we saw, after the first Gulf War, we saw cancer rates shoot way up in some of these areas. And we also saw fetal deformities. If you look online at some of these pictures of what they say are children affected by depleted uranium, massive deformities. It's really sickening.
Well, it is chemical warfare. It has been defined as chemical warfare.
What I was told is that depleted uranium, which is very heavy, is used because it will penetrate armor.
Right.
Yes.
Now, I haven't seen a lot of the insurgents or Al-Qaeda running around in tanks or heavy-duty armor.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what's that all about?
I think it may be potentially a convenient way of disposing of nuclear waste. I'm not sure. I mean, we're dropping tons of it.
Well, the traditional way is to dump it on the Indians who can't resist.
Right. Well, the Iraqis may be the new Indians. I don't know.
You know, the word depleted is unfortunate. I've run into people who, by combining the word uranium and depleted, it sounds nice, like things are getting better.
Yeah, it's not. No. Well, one more thing.
Less radioactivity.
Before we have to move on to another subject, I want to mention one thing, too, about the national debt. I think it's hugely important. I think it may be the most important issue, and especially there's a lot of conservatives, intelligent conservatives, that are concerned about the bailouts and the debt and things like this, but there's something that these, in terms of the Tea Party, they say tax enough already, but really, it's tax cuts that are one of the biggest reasons we have our national debt. We had a massive national debt after World War II, and we paid that off by having, actually it's hard to believe, but a Republican president, even Eisenhower, had a 90% tax rate on the wealthiest 1% or so, millionaires and billionaires, and that enabled us to pay the debt off. And since then, we had Reagan have massive tax cuts down to about 50% on the wealthiest 1%, and then under George W. Bush down to about 30%, to where Warren Buffett was saying, now my secretary pays a lower tax rate than me, and he thought that was wrong, a billionaire, Warren Buffett. And so these massive tax cuts are, and combined with massive military spending, it's like we're having to, I mean, these tax cuts are costing trillions of dollars that they used to be raising, and then we're spending trillions of dollars on military, and that's what's causing the debt. And also entitlements are a huge reason our funding is going, our costs are going up. We're seeing Medicare, Medicaid costing more, but the only way to pay for that is by having fair taxes on the wealthy, and right now we don't.
And cutting the military.
And cutting that too, but we really need, if we really want to address the national debt, we're going to have to raise taxes on the super wealthy. And these are millionaires and billionaires. And that's probably one of the only ways we can deal with this, in conjunction with cutting military spending.
Did I tell you about my encounter? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask if there will be a time when we might talk about the media reporting of what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Will there be a moment?
I don't know. I doubt the corporate media will
have quite a bit of illustration here.
I would like to.
That'll take me just a few moments.
Yeah, no, please, if you have something to say.
No, I just wanted to address the teabagger issue, which is kind of a pejorative term, because I met some young people up in Bentonville when I was shaking hands, and they came up and they were kind of hostile toward me because I was a Green Party.
Right.
And they identified themselves as teabaggers. And I said, well, you know, I am really honored to meet some true Americans who understand the history of this country, that the mom and pop tea shops all up and down the coast who were being supplied by small private ships from all over the world called privateers were doing just fine in business until the British East India Company said, you're going to buy our tea for us and you're going to pay these prices for it, and that's the way it's going to be, and your privateers are illegal, we'll sink them on sight. And the people said, we ain't having none of that, and they dumped the tea in the ocean. So the obvious extension of that for the modern teabagger is sink every ship coming this way that's loaded with stuff for Walmart. Or, in other words, attack corporate America.
Right. Well, I think there's two strains of conservatives within the teabagger movement. I think one is led from the top down by Fox News and these other corporate lobbyists within, like Freedom Works, Dick Armey, etc. They're organizing this as a corporate interest thing, anti-tax thing, essentially anti-taxes on the wealthy. And then there's other, I think, more thinking, more independent-minded conservatives that are sort of upset about the bailouts. They don't fully understand the tax issue. I mean, whose taxes are we supposed to be against? You know, are we supposed to be against? There's the corporate taxes, there's income tax, there's wealth. I mean, there's estate tax, there's excise tax, sales tax. Which taxes do we oppose? And I really think it's helpful to look at in terms of inequality. I mean, we need to be supporting taxes on the super wealthy because it's a matter of power.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've heard that corporations are equivalent to me, a human being. So I think this next year I will only pay taxes on my profits.
Right, right. Were you wanting to mention something, Dick?
Well, yes, I did. This panel is unique in discussing the military contribution to our problems. I happen to clip out articles from newspapers.
I think that's really interesting. That's cool.
So here's a stack, a teeny stack of reports on the deficit alone. 1.42 trillion this year, more than the total of the first 200 years of United States wars. No, of the United States, period. More than the entire economy of India. And $5,000 for every man, woman, and child, as I mentioned ago. Not one of these articles, not one article I have cut out, and year after year, not one, has ever mentioned the military contribution to the deficit of the United States. It's a complete blank.
Right.
Is it a conspiracy? We could spend an entire evening just talking about why the media covers up the military contribution to our problem.